In a criminal case, the state or the prosecution doesn't have to prove motive. However, neither side, neither the prosecution nor the defense, can ignore motive. Motive is, in essence, how does a person benefit from a particular crime? So let's talk today about the crime of murder. The motive in the crime of murder, sometimes there isn't one that makes any sense, but oftentimes there are clear motives of why a person would die. There may be sometimes even more than one person that would benefit from a person dying. And so I want to just go right into one example over which I'll be making several videos. That is the Denise Williams murder case. As you may have heard before, the Williamses, well, the Winchesters, Brian Winchester and Denise were my landlords, my office landlords a few years ago. So I know them personally. I mean, I've seen them personally. I've talked to Brian many times. Never talked to Denise, but I've observed her around with Brian. So in any case, the only issue that I'm going to discuss today is the issue of motive as it pertains to this case. So this was a murder case. I'm not going to go over the background. I'm going to assume that you know the background of the case and what the story was about. So let's just get right into the issue of motive and how the state, this video is only about the state's arguments about motive. So how the state showed that Denise Williams would benefit from the murder of her husband back then in December of 2000. So the state presented three basic theories of motive that they supported with evidence. The first one was sex / an affair. And what was the evidence about on that issue? The evidence was primarily from Brian Winchester, saying that in 1997 he started an affair with Denise. It's interesting that in between 97 and the time of the murder, Denise became pregnant and had a daughter with Mike. Whether that daughter is Brian's or Mike's, that was never discussed as an issue. But the bottom line is this. So the state presented evidence that Denise and Brian were having a very hot affair, and also that Denise wanted to be together, and so Mike, Denise's husband, was in the way. That was one of the reasons why she wanted him killed, and I guess he wanted him dead, was so that they could be together. The second theory of motive from the state is simple logic. Obviously, as you heard, Denise and Mike, the murder victim, had a young daughter. They had a child that, when Mike died, was over, between 1 and 2 years of age. So if Denise wanted to get a divorce from Mike so that she could be with Brian, she would have to share custody and have a custody battle with Mike. And, if Mike happened to die, then custody would not be an issue. She would be able to raise the child and not have to worry about sharing the child with the father. The third theory of motive was the follow the money theory. Basically, how, Denise Williams would stand to benefit significantly from the death of Mike Williams. How? He had a total of $1.75 million in coverage for his life, and she was the only principal beneficiary of those policies. In addition to that, she would get Social Security benefits and all other kinds of assets. I mean, in total, as a result of his death, the evidence was that she received over $2 million. Brian testified that even after after Denise and he got married, that she still kept most of her assets in her own name and separate. The state also presented evidence on the issue of motive with respect to the timing of the murder. There's two lines of theory that it presented as to why the murder occurred when it did. The first one was, again, related to sex. In essence, the state presented testimony. In essence, the state presented testimony from Brian, indicating that Mike had been complaining since the birth of the daughter, of his daughter with Denise, that Denise wasn't having sex with him. And on the day of the murder was actually, the anniversary of Denise and Mike. And Mike had planned a trip for them to go on together, and he had apparently made it clear to Denise that he had given her enough time and that it was time for them to have sex. So obviously, if Brian and Denise were in a heated love affair, they loved each other, they were having sex, they didn't want Denise to have sex with Mike. Finally, the final issue on motive that relates to the timing of the death is the fact that when Brian sold Mike a $1 million policy, Brian, who was the life insurance agent at that time, sold Mike a $1 million life insurance policy after Mike and Denise's daughter was born. And when he sold that policy, Mike already had a $500,000 policy and a $250,000 policy. What Mike decided was that he was gonna eventually let the $500,000 policy lapse, and the time that this policy would lapse was about to expire within a couple of months or a short time after this murder took place. The bottom line is that there was a bonus of $500,000 if they committed the murder before the policy lapsed. So that was the evidence and the theories of the state on the issue of motive in the Denise Williams case. If you're prosecuting or defending a case, if you ignore motive, you do so at your own peril. The motive is not something the state has to prove, but it's something that helps the jury reach a decision because they want to understand the reason behind the crime, the murder, and they want to understand who benefits from it. So obviously, if there's evidence pointing to somebody and the person has no motive for the killing, probably it's a little harder to convict in those scenarios. If there's evidence pointing to somebody, and on top of that, you have all these motives and all these reasons why that person would benefit from the murder, then a conviction becomes easier. Thank you for watching, and I'm actually going to do a few more videos over the next few weeks regarding the Denise Williams case as a way of helping evaluate how the prosecution did its job, how the defense did its job, and there's a lot of interest on the case, so I'll explain exactly, for example, what was all the evidence that actually led to the conviction of Denise Williams. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe.